Welcome to what is, I think, our second session of the funding workshop series that the Creative Industries Network at Brooks is facilitating. We are very happy to have today a presentation on the Centre for Cultural Values Collaborate Fund at the University of Leeds. When it first started, it was really quite an event in the academic circles. It's a very innovative way of supporting the development of new research projects between actors in the UK cultural sector and academic researchers. And as the centre manager, Liz Harrop, will share with you some of the insights and the reflections. It's been a very, very interesting program with the range of creative methodologies that come out of it, different projects, emphasis on arts and culture and heritage and screen. So one of those really interesting, innovative exercises in the field that we think are very, very useful and we would like to see more of. And obviously also we want to be, as academics, able to collaborate in these really exciting ways. So we're looking for insights and recommendations and advice. Yeah. Thank you, Liz, for joining us today.
Great. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the time to share with you some of our learning. So I'm the Centre Manager for the Centre for Cultural Value, which includes leading the development and the delivery of our Collaborate funding programme that we've been running over the last 2 years. For those of you who might not be that familiar with the Centre for Cultural Value, we're an AHRC funded national research centre. We're based at the University of Leeds, but we work across the whole of the UK and beginning to work internationally now as well. We were created to support the cultural sector to build a kind of shared understanding of the differences that art, culture and heritage make to people's lives and society. We work with cultural practitioners, we work with consultants, academics, funders and policymakers, and our activity broadly covers these kind of 4 areas. So we look at secondary research, so drawing out learning from existing research and evaluation to make relevant insights more accessible and connected to cultural practice. We support the art and culture and heritage sectors to develop skills in research, evaluation and reflective practice. And so you may be aware of our national co-created evaluation principles, which are the first evaluation principles for the UK cultural sector. In fact, they're the first cultural evaluation principles worldwide. So we're quite pleased to have been able to develop that over the last 2 years, and we're developing online training programs and resources that sit around that help people to adopt the principles in their work. We're also building networks to explore kind of timely questions of cultural value. So the notion of cultural value is a shifting and contextual thing. You know, there is no firm definition of it. And we look at the centre particularly at the social value of culture. So we're looking at social models. And there's obviously a lot of debate around that. And so we hope to amplify diverse voices within that debate and, you know, and play a sort of thought leadership role around that. And we also support policymakers to make evidence-informed decisions. And one of the key pieces of work that we did for that was leading a 15-month study throughout the COVID lockdown period of the impacts of the COVID-19 on the arts, culture and heritage sector, and we were informing Treasury and DCMS throughout that process of the evidence that we were gathering, which was helping them to make decisions for things like recovery funds. And we were also working very closely with local authorities and regional authorities who were doing similar things in their own regions. The Collaborate programme sits across kind of quite a lot of those areas of work. It's an open call research funding programme. It brings together cultural sector partners and academic researchers. So that includes all UK-based arts, culture or heritage organisations or individual practitioners, and also researchers from any discipline who are working in UK-based higher education institutions or independent research organisations. The programme really seeks to investigate underexplored questions about cultural value So partnerships can present projects to us which either cover topics or issues that need further research to strengthen the evidence base, or which seek to investigate perspectives on cultural value from individuals or communities who are currently underrepresented in cultural value research. So we know from our secondary digesting process, for example, that might include migrant communities, or people from Black or Asian or minoritized backgrounds, or people who identify as deaf or disabled, or people who are living in rural areas of the UK. The research projects themselves run over 12 months. They must be highly relevant to practice, and we encourage them to use and develop innovative research methodologies. By innovative research methodologies, we mean either emerging research methodologies, so it's an opportunity to pilot new methodologies, or it might be about the application of proven methodologies, but in new contexts. To date, we've run 2 open call funding rounds. The first was in 21-22, and we've just finished round 2, which was run in 22-23. This has resulted in 21 new research partnerships and 11 fully funded projects. The project funding that is available is up to £20,000 per project, and the funding pot for the programme is actually ring-fenced from within our own AHRC research grant. So it's a relatively modest amount of funding for a research project. So we do look at it as being a kind of stepping stone or seed funding programme. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we put the programme together, because I think, as Maya was indicating, it is quite an innovative and quite different approach to bringing together partners and funding research. So it's really rooted in the Centre's overarching philosophy, which recognises that there's diverse perspectives about culture and cultural value. And also, we feel that failure should be an integral part of the process of collaboration and of making work together. So in developing the model for the fund, we wanted to look really broadly at the cultural sector and the research funding landscape, and try and understand what are the issues or perceptions which could impede the development of new research projects between cultural sector and academic researchers. We started first with some analysis of the existing funding landscape, and we found that actually there's a wide range of funds available for the cultural sector, but they're actually focused mainly on developing their practice, but none of them are specifically supported to do this in an evidence-based way, or to nurture research ambitions or collaborations with academics. Similarly, we found there was quite a lot of funding routes open to academics to expand and explore their own research questions or methodologies, but many of these omitted funding to support developing collaborative partnerships as part of that, and they often adopted a sort of model of researching on rather than researching with, and tended obviously to prioritise the needs of the academic partner. So we also convened a series of in-person workshops, which we did pre-pandemic. This was in 2019 when we first set the centre up, so we were able to do it all in person. And we held workshops in London, Edinburgh and Cardiff, where we brought together cultural sector practitioners and academics to talk to us and share their lived experience of having worked with each other and engaging with research. And these were really critical early conversations that revealed some very interesting kind of perceptions and barriers around collaborative research. One of the things that we found was that for some practitioners, particularly I would say individual artists and those based in smaller organisations, there was a really deep cynicism about working with academic partners and the value that it might bring to their practice, because participants reported that their previous experience of research partnerships and the sort of existing structures that they were used to had felt mainly kind of extractive from the sector. Many cultural organisations felt that researchers were working with them, but saw them as kind of gatekeepers of their audiences rather than equitable partners. And whether real or perceived, there was also a sense that they felt that the academic partner would think that they had a natural authority within a research partnership, which would lead to the cultural partner having a diminished voice. From the HE sector side as well, we heard that participants broadly acknowledged that they felt there was a really poor understanding within their own practice and their institutions of how to develop effective, sustainable and mutually beneficial partnerships. and that academic research often fails to reach the arts and cultural sector in a way that is accessible or relevant to their own practice. So, I mean, I've given you the worst end of it. I have to say there were some really good examples within that. And one of the things that we did try to do was look at where people felt that partnerships were working really, really well, and try and build some of that into our model as well. So we set out to create a new research fund that would try to balance the following key elements: the development of research that could contribute to a deeper understanding of cultural value, particularly from the perspective of the cultural sector and with clear relevance to their practice. We wanted to produce something that would model equitable partnerships, so people could see what that looked like and how people had demonstrated it in practice. So we wanted to model those partnerships between academics and cultural sector practitioners. And we wanted, actually, as the centre ourselves, to see this programme as a piece of action research for ourselves as well, to explore and understand better how to support collaborative research itself. So the model sort of broadly works on a 4-stage process. At stage 1, we start with cultural sector applicants. We ask them to submit an expression of interest which proposes a key research area or question, and also describes what they might be seeking in terms of a research partner. Starting the process with the cultural sector partner ensures that the eventual projects are rooted in their real world issues. It's highly relevant to their practice, and also it really reveals to us what those underexplored but vital research questions are. One of the other reasons for introducing a kind of staged model as well was to try and make the programme as accessible as possible and as inclusive as possible as to those who may not have engaged with research before or don't have experience of a grant writing. We really also wanted to be respectful of the time of freelance workers who make up quite a large proportion of the cultural sector and smaller cultural organisations, because we're really aware of how much capacity actually writing applications can take up. So the expression of interest forms are really light touch. Applicants are not asked to write more than one side of A4. There's only 4 questions on that initial application. We use plain English, and applications can be made in a range of alternative formats, including video. We also provide funding for support workers for those applicants who might need assistance with application writing. And we use an assessment panel of academics and cultural practitioners, as well as centre staff, to select the 10 strongest proposals. So at stage 2, those 10 proposals will go forward, and we've widely advertised those proposals to academic researchers and networks and invite them to submit an expression of interest in response to the project proposal. So they express interest in working on that project with that cultural sector partner. At stage 3, the assessment panel review the academic applicants and they support a matchmaking process. And this is a really fundamentally important part of the Collaborate model, the matchmaking. It's really informed by those initial workshops and conversations we held, because there was a very strong understanding that many existing academic and cultural sector partnerships seem to have come about through closed connections, or people couldn't remember how it had come about. It was certainly seemed very untransparent, if that's a word. This often saw kind of the sense that academics and institutions were often engaging with the same partners over and over again, and it was sort of building a mythology, a potential to perpetuate the notion that smaller organisations or individual practitioners either weren't interested in engaging in research or didn't have the capacity to engage as research partners. So by providing this kind of brokerage, this matchmaking element to the model, the programme sort of levels the playing field for those who don't have access to networks that would support research partnership development. And feedback has shown that overall, actually, both cultural sector and academic partners have ended up really valuing this part of the model, because you never know who you don't know. So it's really interesting as well, the kind of serendipity that's happened within it, and where people have really found a research partner that they couldn't have imagined they wanted until they read that application. So I think that's one of the things that's really interesting. It's creating some really interesting disruptions, some really interesting creative partnerships as well. Once the partnerships have been initiated, again, they work together to develop and refine their research question, their methodology, and they jointly produce a funding application for the project. And at this point, again, we provide a bursary to partnerships at this stage to support time and other associated costs of jointly developing that more detailed application. And at stage 4, the research journey begins. So the projects are awarded funding and they have 12 months to deliver their activity. So that's a very quick overview of how the model works. But as you can see, it's actually, there's quite a long tail on it. It's quite slow in terms of the beginning part of it. And I think one of the things that's been helpful for that is because it's really helped people to do that thinking about, where does this project sit? What can we commit to this project? So, and you know, it gives them time actually to build those partnerships before they get into rush into the kind of the process of actually, what are we going to do and what does the project activity look like as well. And we felt that that was really important as well. You know, giving that space for that reflection and for that thinking time has really managed some of the risk that might be associated with you know, putting partnerships together in this kind of way. So what have we learned? Today, our learning from the programme, and I must say that the projects are still ongoing, our round 2 projects are still ongoing until September 2024. So we're still learning all the time, we're still gathering information from the programme. But to date, we can say that our learning is kind of falling into 3 key areas. So we have a really much deeper understanding of the research motivations and the needs of the cultural sector at the moment. And that feels really live as well, because we're going back to them, you know, year on year and asking them, what are your questions? What are the things that you're interested in? What are your research priorities? And it's giving us a really healthy sample from across the UK and across different art forms within the cultural sector, which is really valuable intelligence. We're starting to see some emerging principles which are critical to the success of creating ethical and equitable research collaboration. So people are telling us really, like, what are those critical success factors? What is it that's really made this collaboration work? And one of the ways in which we're gathering that is because we build, again, into the whole model, a lot of space and time for reflection, and we emphasize reflective practice all the way through. And we've identified some of the kind of key benefits of supporting collaborative practice, as well as some of the persistent challenges and barriers that we feel are still hampering successful research collaborations. So I will share some of that with you now. So the thirst for research, I think the first thing we know from the programme is definitely the cultural sector wants to be involved in research. They have plenty of research questions across a whole range of disciplines. They're not just interested in working with arts and humanities researchers, they're interested in working with researchers across all disciplines, and in fact interdisciplinary as well. So we have some really interesting projects where we have philosophers and physicists working with theatre companies. So, you know, it's a really interesting way of bringing together academics from different disciplines as well as partners from different sectors. Of course, cultural practitioners and organisations want to be able to capture and articulate the value of their practice, but there's actually, what we're seeing from year 1 into year 2, that there's a growing and particular urgency for research in the sector at this time. So post-pandemic and amid a climate and cost of living crises, the sector is really struggling. It's struggling with shrinking capacity and resources and questions of sustainability. They need to better understand how cultural value is created. They know culture is valuable, but how it manifests is really interesting. So for who is that value created? They want to be more clear-sighted about what works and what needs to change, because they have to ensure that their resources are well targeted. So when they were asked about the reasons why they wanted to create these research projects, many of our cultural sector participants were already anticipating the clear benefits that could come from it. So they were talking about research informing the development of new business models within the sector, new modes of programme delivery, piloting better and more regenerative and sustainable modes of working, generating better understanding of how to respond to changing needs of communities and audiences. And so you can see, with that in mind, the notion of research impact around these projects is really hard baked into the projects from the start. And in the first round, as I say, we saw a significant uptick in people's interest in research from round 1 to round 2. Partly that may be to do with people's familiarity with the programme, but when we launched at the end of 2021, we received 183 expressions of interest from cultural sector participants. But a year later, in the second call, we received 296 applications. And the source of those applications was definitely not the usual suspects. It was not the big, research savvy arts organisations. Across both funding rounds, the expressions of interest were predominantly from micro organisations and individual practitioners. So 80% of our applications come from organisations of that size. And most of those applicants had no or only minimal previous experience of working with academic researchers or using research to inform their practice. So 70% fell into that category, which indicates to us that the desire is there, but there traditionally hasn't been the connections or the infrastructure or the funding available to welcome those individuals into the research community. So achieving this reach has really set the scene throughout the programme and in our work with HE sector and research funders more widely, for us to have expansive discussions really about who could and should be better supported to be involved in research. And the high response rate has also helped the centre to shape other areas of its work. So it's provided, as I said, with really valuable intelligence, which has contributed to our deeper understanding of our secondary research themes, what's of vital importance to cultural practitioners, where there are gaps and inequities within existing research. And it's also helped us to develop a whole suite of practice resources for the sector around research. So I'll just show you some of those. This is just a sample of some of the research-related resources that we have developed in response to needs expressed by participants in the programme. So as you can see, they vary from resources that help to unpick and demystify the actual research process to methodological guides and even support for creative dissemination. And just a quick plug here to say, this is just a selection of our resources. All of our resources are available from our website. You can click on our resources tab from the main page. And this includes our secondary research digests, as well as expert reads on various different topics and webinars and podcasts. And we do find actually our analytics show they're very well used by academics and students as well as cultural practitioners. Okay, end of plug. That way. So the principles of collaboration that we're seeing emerging, as I said earlier, one of the original aims for the centre was to actually investigate and support collaborative research practice in and of itself. And this is an aspect of the programme that sort of runs parallel to developing individual research inquiries. We knew from those initial consultations that ensuring everybody involved could come to the table as equals was going to be really vital. But in practice, what that means is that the centres had to adopt a really deeply human-centred, agile approach so that we can be responsive to the individual needs of everyone taking part in the programme. And that means that we've sort of moved beyond the usual boundaries of research funder. We've become almost an additional collaborator in each of the projects and provide a bridge between the sectors and the individual partnerships. It's a process, as I said, that has a lot of space for reflection and learning built in. Sometimes it frustrates me to describe Collaborate as a funding programme. I prefer to call it a development programme or funding with support, if you like, because I feel like actually the model is so much more than just bringing people together and funding them. You know, we're there throughout in a kind of mentor and support role as well. We're really privileged to be participants, if you like, alongside the research project partners, and it's really enabled us to create these kind of ongoing, open and constructive dialogues. So we can capture not only examples of best practice and innovation, but we're also able to reframe what I suppose in other contexts might be seen as failures, but we understand that to be really valuable and shareable learning. And actually, you know, the failures, if you like, is where quite a lot of these principles of collaboration have come from. It's come from people's reflections on this is what worked for us, or this is what we should do more of. It's from people pivoting within their projects, and you know, we see that as it is part and parcel of the learning process. It is not a failure from our point of view. So whilst the round 2 projects are obviously still in their delivery phase, so they're still producing, but we can already summarize some of the principles of collaboration from the conversations that we've held with the round one projects. And it seems like these are really closely aligned with developing a sort of shared understanding of what creating equity and agency actually means in practice. So one of our participants described this as, you know, the secret sauce recipe for collaboration. And although I haven't put these in, this isn't like a ranked order or anything, but I would say that if there was a number one, it definitely is empathy. So what we've seen across the projects is that there's very many different kind of project management approaches across different project teams, but there is an undeniable thread of compassion and care and consideration within all of the partnerships. And so in practice, what this looks like is all of the partners investing time and attention to exploring each other's worlds, you know, being able to take soundings from each other, seeking to understand each other's mindsets, their worldviews and processes. And I suppose the model that we've created with the Collaborate Fund, it not only provides the environment for that, but it actually actively encourages that kind of reflective practice and you know, and gives time and space for that, which I think is often not present in other research development processes. That also speaks to the next point, which is about respecting boundaries. So recognizing and paying really careful attention to what your partner is and isn't able to commit to, and really making that the basis of building into your planning of what you'll actually do, or how, on what scale your project will run. And the other side of that, of course, is being honest and open about your own experiences and expectations and needs from the project. And in doing that, it's about acknowledging and addressing imbalances. So every one of the collaboration partnerships recognized that there was some sort of imbalance within their partnership. They came to it with this sense of imbalance. In some cases, this might be related to either real or perceived notions of power and status and experience, capacity or resources, but actually the aspect that I think every single project talked about and spoke about most frequently was time. Participants really recognized that time is both defined and respected very differently within the cultural sector and within the academic sector. And it's actually, without having really open conversations about that, it can be one of the primary sources of frustration and misunderstanding and mismanaged expectations, I think. Another source of kind of frustration and misunderstanding can be around language and communication. So one of our participants described this as cultural practitioners and academics being collaborators divided by a common language. So it's not just about that usual decoding jargon and acronyms and our kind of professional buzzwords and things, but actually finding out how words are understood differently in different contexts. And, you know, communication in terms of that, everybody, it boiled down to, it has to be frequent and it has to be honest. Embracing emergent inquiry, that's quite an academically way of describing this principle, but collaboration, it brings difference, and that's a really valuable opportunity to play with possibility through generative thinking rather than kind of pinning things down too quickly or clinging on to preconceived ideas. It's really valuable in that you can leverage fresh perspectives, new ways of working, but also it's something that people felt was quite a vulnerable and could be quite a tiring space to occupy for what would needed to be an extended period of time, you know, occupying that space of curiosity and ambiguity for longer than you might want to, you know, because everybody feels like we've got to get on, we've got to do something kind of thing. But actually that foundation of kind of sitting in that space of understanding where different people are coming from, being willing to let go of ideas and to embrace new ones and things like that, it can be quite a long-term process. And that's why, you know, the final one is about, it's essential to come into that collaboration being open to learning and acknowledging that you're both bringing expertise and naivety to different parts of the process. There is no guru in the room, you know, people have different experiences and different expertise and different skills which are equally valuable. So I just want to share with you some of the reflections that we've had from some of the academics that have been involved in the projects on how that experience that process has felt to them, perhaps in contrast to their previous experience of research development. Now, I'm aware there's quite a lot to read on that screen, but the kind of words that kind of spring out to me is things like, you know, there's something about the gentleness with which we've undertaken this research, and building space and vulnerability in relationships, and not following pigeonholes. And, you know, I think it's really, really interesting. It clearly feels kind of quite refreshing for academics as well, I think, to work in this way. So talking about the benefits, as you can see from some of these quotes, so these are taken from across our round one projects as well, from both academics and cultural sector participants. There's benefits on both sides, which is what we would hope to see. And the range of outcomes and benefits for the individual projects and partners is, of course, still emerging. And again, another quick plug, if you do want to find out more about the individually funded projects and follow their progress and their findings, there are project pages for every single one of the projects on our website. So you can go and click on the spotlight on the project page, and it has all of their reports and findings and outputs and things like that on those pages as well. But already, I think what we can say is that we've started to see some sort of universal benefits of collaborative practice emerging from across the project. So academic participants have really seen the benefit in the programme's ability to catalyse new research skills and new research questions. They can also see the potential for meeting the broader research aims for their institutions. So, you know, it demonstrates a practice for developing really strong impact activity. So a lot of the academic participants are talking about, you know, building this into activity that might create new ref case studies, because they're working on questions that have really immediate relevance and impact outside of the academic institution, and it's opening up different networks and different connections that their university might not necessarily have had access to. I would say as well that this kind of shared and sort of dialogic practice of the Collaborate projects has been really fertile ground for methodological innovation. So the strong connection as well with the research inquiry and live practice has really quickly led to a range of experimental, creative, and actually quite socially responsive methodologies. So that's one of the most interesting things that's coming out. And before the end of this year, one of the things that we're going to be doing is producing a lot more resource guides around methodologies and the innovative methodologies that have been developed within the project. So watch this space for that. But a good example of that, for example, is the round one project with Compass Live Art. They partnered with researchers at the Institute for Social Justice at York St John University, and they were looking at exploring the impact of co-creation practice with artists. Working together, they've created a sort of participatory and creative research methodology that mirrors the cultural partners' creative practices. And that includes a sort of bespoke walking interview method, and we have a methodology guide on their walking interview method. And what they found is actually this has actually generated much deeper and sort of very much more person-centered and place-specific data than was actually anticipated at the beginning of the project. And I think that's also been something that's observed in the collaboration between theatre company Quarantine and physicist Rox Middleton from the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Bristol. So their partnerships exploring methodologies for better understanding and articulating the value of beauty, and their research is focusing on whether audience members have been affected by beauty during Quarantine's performance of 12 Last Songs. So the team actually designed and sent out bespoke paper lab books, and that's the picture that you can see on the presentation there. They were sent out to individual audience members after the event, and they asked their subjects to handwrite and draw their reflections on memories of the performance. And really interestingly, again, it kind of comes back to this taking time to understand people's environments and working practices, because the lab books themselves were inspired by the artists going to a visit to Rox's lab, where they saw her lab books, which are used to design and record her experiments and document scientific processes. And so they were so impressed by that actually that's what inspired this methodology of data gathering. And although they acknowledged that it did generate a smaller data sample than, say, something like a digital survey, digital audience survey. The collected information was actually far, far richer, and the team now have much better insight into what remains with audience members once a performance is over, which is really what they needed in terms of where they wanted to go with this research informing the design of their productions. My final benefit, sorry, I would say is there's real evidence that there's sort of new questions and new connections that are integral to the collaborative process, and that's leading to this kind of snowballing effect. So there's sort of agency and benefits that are being shared outside of the initial project partnerships already. So as an example, as part of their methodology Rising Arts Agency and their Collaborate academic research partner, Adi Drenshiva, who works at King's College in London, they made their research conversations public. So they produced a series of podcasts with research participants, which is called Power in Partnerships. They're really interesting conversations to listen to. But what's great about that is that actually the methodology itself simultaneously adds to the research data and engages the wider sector in responding to the research topic. So it's got a lovely kind of looping effect that's going on within their research project as well. And there's a wide range of kind of creative commissions and career development opportunities that have been afforded through the project. So here's a quote, for example, from one of the young craft citizens that worked on the Craft Council's project. And it's really interesting that even from where she sits, sort of slightly on the edge of the partnership and the project activity, she's recognizing this ethos of collaboration being valued over competition, and being able to connect and expand contacts. And we're really pleased to say as well that she's actually managed to get another research internship through having participated in this project. So that's the benefits, which is all the lovely feel-goody stuff. But of course, the programme has come with challenges as well. And although I've only got three there, they're three pretty big ones. So the first one I would say which is a problem with the programme, is scalability. So overall, the model of Collaborate has been really successful in supporting those previously mentioned principles of ethical and equitable collaboration. But as I said, in order to do so, the centre has really had to assume a very active role in the process. We've adopted a lot of new responsibilities alongside that of, research funder. So we are also partnership broker, we are project coordinator, we are mentor, we are mediator, we are critical friend. And administratively, that is heavy on the man hours, because we really try to take that care and think about what kind of support people would need if we funded them. But it does raise questions about the model scalability. And clearly, we've only been able to fund 11 projects out of 500 applications. So we're not able with this model to really meet the demand that there is in the sector. I mean, the funding we've had available, we've only been able to fund about 3% of cultural sector applicants who submitted as expression of interest. But even with twice the amount of money, I don't think we would have had the capacity to fully support more projects than we have. The second biggest challenge has been doing all of this from within a university context. So structurally, we're not a funding body, but we have to abide by the terms and conditions of our UKRI grant and all the associated university processes that come with that, which means there has been some disconnect, I would say, between the intentionality and participant expectations of the programme, which is to be very light touch and very agile and very collaborative and open and transparent, and then the university-led contracting processes, data protection, due diligence, ethics approvals, which are the processes that we can't circumnavigate, and by which the funding by going through which the funding could be released to project partners. On another point about university context as well, I will say that whilst individual academics have really valued participating in the Collaborate programme, a number of researchers have reported how they felt that their institutions have actually undervalued this activity. They feel like the concept of research development with this kind of uncertain, differing outcomes doesn't sit neatly alongside the expectations and processes of their institutions, which seem inextricably linked to longer, larger research income generation. And finally, there's risk inherent in the process. What you need to make it work means you have to be more open to experimentation. You have to be open to failure. It's slower practice. It's harder practice. It's disruptive. It's bespoke. It costs you more, not necessarily in money, but definitely in time and commitment. And that's a pretty hard sell to any department head, I think, for academics. But I will say, have hope, because although the programme has presented some of those internal challenges for academics, it's also opened up some really vital conversations within their institutions about how research is conducted, for and with whom. And we're already supporting some emerging new models from people that have participated with us in the programme for new funds and new collaborative research programmes. So that brings me on to the what next, and I am winding it up now. So for the Collaborate programme itself, obviously, we've not been able to announce a new round of funding for the programme this year because the centre itself is actually coming to the end of its current funding period. So we finish in September 2024, but we're still supporting the learning from our 11 funded projects. And following engagement with the Collaborate programme, York St John University has already developed a community research grants programme. And this closely follows the Collaborate model. So you can see the outlined objective there, that being relevant and impactful, and, you know, again, starting with where the practitioner is. So they're inviting them to bring the research to the academics, not the other way around. And we're also advising another previous academic applicant who is currently developing an AHRC funding application. They're hoping to build a partnership between universities on the South Coast with the aim of developing a collaborative research funding programme which would be responsive to the specific needs of cultural sector organisations in that region as well. So we're really hopeful that that's going to be successful too. And we're always open to anybody who is wanting to develop something in this mode as well. We're very open to kind of having those conversations and supporting you with that process as well. So I'll leave it there. We've still got a bit of time, I think, for some questions. I hope it's a bit of a rattle through. It's a lot to take in, I know, but I hope some of it at least have been useful and of interest, and happy to discuss in the remaining time we have.